Paribrajacharya, that's the Paras of Sri Srimad Bhagavatam Swami, Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai, Nityalila Pravishra Vishnu Pad, Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Goswami Prabhupada Ki Jai, Ananta Gauta Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Jai, Namacharya Haridas Thakur Ki Jai, Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda, Sri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaura Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai, Sri Shri Radha Krishna Gopa Gopinath Shama Kunda Radha Kunda Giri Govardhan Ki Jai, Sri Vrindavan Dham Ki Jai, Mathura Dham Ki Jai, Navadvip Mayapur Dham Ki Jai, Jagannath Puri Dham Ki Jai, Gaur Premanand. All glories to the Son of Devotees, all glories to the Son of Devotees, all glories to Sri Guru and Gaura. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So we're reading from Canto 10, Chapter 8, text 14 and 15 is on the board. So I'll just read through 14 and then we'll do 15. So text 14. Pragayam Vasudevasya Kvachitjatas Tavat Majaha Vasudeva iti Srimad Abhigyana Samprachakshite. For many reasons, this beautiful son of yours sometimes appeared previously as the son of Vasudeva. Therefore, those who are learned sometimes call this child Vasudeva. That's Vasudeva with a long A, and Vasudeva with no. Yes. Okay, so purport. Gagamuni indirectly disclosed. This child was originally born as the son of Vasudeva, although he is acting as your child. Generally, he is your child, but sometimes he is the son of Vasudeva. The text 15. Bahuni, Shanti, Namani, Rupani, Cha, Sutasya, Te, Guna, Karmanu, Rupani, Tan, Aham, Veda, No, Janaha, Bahuni Shanti Namami, Rupani Chasutasyate, Guna Kamana Rupani, Tanyam Vedano Jana, Bahuni Shanti Namani, Rupani Chasutasyate, Guna Kamana Rupani, Yam Vedano Jana,
Namah
For this son of yours, there are many forms and names according to his transcendental qualities and activities. These are known to me, but people in general do not understand them. Purport. Bahuni. The Lord has many names. Advaitam, Achyutam, Anadim, Anantarupam, Adyam Purana Purusham Nachak Yoganam Cha. As stated in the Bhagavad Gita 5.33, the Lord is one, but he has many forms and many names. It was not that because Gargamuni gave the child the name Krishna, that was his only name. He has other names, such as Bhaktivatsal, Giridhari, Govinda, and Gopal. If we analyze the nirukti, or semantic derivation of the word Krishna, we find that Na signifies that he stops the repetition of birth and death, and Krish means Satarta, or existence. That is, Krishna is the whole of existence. Also, Krish means attraction, and Na means Ananda, or bliss. Krishna is known as Mukunda because he wants to give everybody spiritual, eternal, blissful life. Unfortunately, because of the living entity's little independence, the living entity wants to deprogram the program of Krishna. This is material disease. Nonetheless, because Krishna wants to give transcendental bliss to the living entities, he appears in various forms. Therefore, he is called Krishna. Because Gargamuni was an astrologer, he knew what others did not know. Yet, Krishna has so many names that even Gargamuni did not know them all. It is to be concluded that Krishna, according to his transcendental activities, has many names and many forms. For this son of yours there are many forms and names according to his transcendental qualities and activities. These are known to me, but people in general do not understand them. So, Prabhupada's put here this, because the living entity's little independence, the living entity wants to deprogram the program of Krishna. Those of you who are getting on in years but can still remember something of the mid-70s and later also. This volume of the Bhagavatam let's see, this was written after Prabhupada's disappearance actually, but oh no, maybe not. Anyway, in 1976, Prabhupada was visiting America, and at the Sunday feast in Los Angeles in June of '76, there was a demonstration outside the Los Angeles temple, and there was a group of people called the Deprogrammers, and they were composed mainly of devotees' parents and also some hired thugs that they employed to do their mischievous activities. So the idea was that people had seen how drastically the lives of the devotees have changed once they met Srila Prabhupada. And they were very upset. They couldn't understand it, and so they started to demonstrate, and they started a campaign to stop the devotees. It culminated in 1977 with not Supreme Court. Who's from America that knows that? The legal system. The grand jury is convened on. Huh? Yeah, I was just trying to think of the legal term. Anyway, after seeing their children become so drastically transformed from anything that they could identify with, naturally the parents got very anxious, and some of them got very they got very agitated up to the point of actually hiring these thugs to capture devotees whilst they were out on Sankirtan, and they would get a court order for 1 month allowing them to get complete control of their children. What's that called? Conservatorship or something? I can't remember what there's a technical term for it. But anyway, we had a couple of devotees that were kidnapped actually from the street, and they were taken to, I think one was taken to his former home. One devotee was taken and locked up in a motel for 1 month, and all legal. And then they would try to break the faith of the devotees, and as a result of that, then we approached the Supreme Court and requested a grand jury investigation. And the end result of that was that they actually took these devotees and locked them up, and then they brought a case against the temple authorities in New York. We had requested the grand jury investigation, but instead of the judge or prosecutor, instead of interviewing the devotees, because we were the ones that were bringing the case, they instead brought a case against the devotees. They never they never even bothered to interview any of our devotees. They just simply, captured them and put them in this situation where they were restricted from practicing Krishna consciousness. So some of the things that they were doing was, if in response to their verbal attacks, then some of when the devotees were attacked like that, they actually naturally were chanting Hare Krishna. And as soon as they chanted the mantra, then the deprogrammers would stuff ice cubes in their mouths so that they couldn't chant. And also, as we're vegetarian, of course, they forced them to eat meat. And they also, let's see, they took pictures of Krishna, and Prabhupada tore them up, threw them on the floor, stamped on them. So they were doing whatever they could do to try to break the faith of the devotees. So it was a kind of a heavy situation. When we tried to get a case against the deprogrammers, then they prosecuted Mayapur, he brought charges against the devotees, although we had requested the grand jury investigation. So it was a difficult situation. Prabhupada was first heard about it in October of 1976. We had gone to Chandigarh to do some programs there. On the last day there in Chandigarh, they had a news conference, press conference, and one of the newsmen, he had picked up on this story about the deprogramming, so-called deprogramming in America. And they'd also brought charges of kidnapping. This was against Hare Krishna, where he was the 10th president, and Tridas. Is Tridas still here? He was here last week. Anyway, he was in charge of the Sankirtan party. So they were prosecuted for kidnap, extortion, and other, whatever they could throw at us, basically. So then that meant going to court. And for a couple of months, we were getting news on a regular basis from Srimad Krishna Maharaj, Hare Krishna and others. Prabhupada, as soon as he heard about the deprogramming attempts from this reporter in Chandigarh, Prabhupada said, no, it's not true. He hadn't seen any of the charges, but he just immediately told the reporter it's not true. So Prabhupada had that confidence in his disciples that without knowing any of the actual charges, he immediately set them right that this is not true. So for a few months, up until March of '77, we had to build a case and answer this grand jury indictment. And I think in March, late March, the case went to court, and the judge, fortunately, was a good man, intelligent. He'd been given some of Prabhupada's books to read. We'd made a presentation about our position as a genuine religious organization, and the end result was that his name was John Leahy, the judge. So he concluded at the end of it that nobody can interfere with the religious practices or the rights to practice their own religion. America's founded on the First Amendment Act, and he invoked that. And he was very clear in his judgment. So all the charges were thrown out of court, and Prabhupada afterwards, he was very, very happy, naturally enough, because the court had found that the Hare Krishna movement, which he had founded 10 years before, was a bona fide religion. So, when the charges were first brought up, when we first heard about it, Prabhupada was immediately energized. He immediately called for his CBCs, they discussed with our lawyers, and eventually we heard the defense. So one of the things that Prabhupada said that we should do to defend ourselves is that we should submit all of Prabhupada's books as evidence on our side. Prabhupada said, keep them in court as long as you can. This is an attack on the Hare Krishna movement, so we have to defend. He said, you can put all of my books, 50, 60 books, this is our defense statement. So Prabhupada was very fired up. And he had several meetings when we first heard about the court cases. I think we were in Chandigarh, and then we went from there back to Vrindavan. And as soon as we got back to Vrindavan, Prabhupada called for all the head pujaris and all the leaders, the Goswamis in Vrindavan, anybody who was of some influence or importance. He called them to his room in Vrindavan, and he showed them all the accusations that were going on, and he asked them, now you give us some letter endorsing that the Hare Krishna movement is a genuine religion. So they did it, despite whatever disagreements there may have been at that time, and there was some, with Prabhupada allowing Westerners, to worship the deity, to get Brahman initiation, etc. Still, when it came to, this legal side of things, Prabhupada told them all, put aside our differences, we should group together. I'd like statements from all of you, the important people in Vrindavan, and we'll submit that as evidence. So they did that on Prabhupada's request. And later on we went down to Hyderabad. Same thing there. As soon as Prabhupada arrived there, he called for a meeting of all the religious leaders in Hyderabad. And then he told his men, now you do the same thing. Jayapataka Maharaj, Tamal Krishna Maharaj, because he was in America. So in America and in India, Prabhupada really encouraged us, now fight. So this is it. It says, if we win this case, nobody can challenge the authenticity and practice of Krishna consciousness. So, deprogramming. Prabhupada says here, the living entity wants to deprogram the program of Krishna. So Krishna has his own program, he's got his own relationship with all these tiny, as Prabhupada said, that living entities have little independence. So Prabhupada is saying that the real program, Krishna's program, is to get everybody to surrender as much as possible to the will of the Lord and enter into his pastimes. That's the actual program. And these people that were harassing us, they had coined the deprogramming name, they've given that label, that all we're doing is deprogramming these people who somehow or another they become brainwashed to take up this weird religion. It's not even a religion. So brainwashing also, that was part of the charge. We were brainwashing people, and just as, like in Korea, in the Korean War in 1950, was it? 1951. one of the tactics that they were using, the North Koreans, they would capture either American soldiers or South Korean soldiers, and then they would harass them in so many different ways until they got to a point where they kind of broke down. And then they put them on TV or transmit, and they'd have this American serviceman glorifying North Korea and condemning American civilization, and they would use that as their propaganda work. So that was called deprogramming. So Srila Prabhupada then, because our lawyers told us that there's no such thing as, there's no such law that covers something like deprogramming. The name itself, deprogramming, is bogus. It's just a term that they've made up. But there's no legal definition of deprogramming. So anyway, this was all going on. And at the end of the trial, then we were found not guilty. And the judge added to that everybody has a right to worship in the way that they wish, and nobody can interfere with that. So when Prabhupada got that letter, got the information that the deprogrammers had been defeated, then he was exceedingly happy. He was very happy because now he said nobody can touch us, we're according to the law, we're a bona fide religion. So for Prabhupada, he wrote to me actually just after it, and he said, is this not a great victory for Krishna and the devotees? And the judge has now dismissed their charges, now we can go on with our spiritual practices without harassment. So this deprogramming comment here in Prabhupada's purport, that was linked with Prabhupada's experience in America with the authorities that are bringing this case against us. So Krishna has a program. That program is to purify us, to clarify our consciousness by chanting Krishna's names. Prabhupada says that he has many names, those to say. So any chanting of any of the names of Krishna, it will be efficacious. It frees the mind, it frees the intelligence, so that we can think clearly. People in Kali Yuga, of course, they're not they're not very clever, put it that way. It's mentioned earlier in the Bhagavatam that hang on. Sorry, I lost my track. Yes, Prabhupada says Krishna wants to give transcendental bliss to the living entities, and he appears in various forms. So he's addressed by many different names also, and that purifies the heart. The whole situation in Kali Yuga is prevented by the modes of passion and ignorance. So Prabhupada's aim was to at least bring people up to the mode of goodness, so that they become qualified enough to be able to understand the philosophy of the proper Bhagavad Gita, Srimad Bhagavatam, that every living being is a part and parcel of Krishna, and as such, their real identity is that they're spirit souls. But the karmis, the ordinary living beings, they have no information about Krishna. They don't know who he is, what their relationship is with it, and they continue on in the mode of ignorance and passion. And they have no idea, actually, about what the real program of living is meant to be. In Kali Yuga, we can't escape the influence of motive ignorance. It's very difficult to do that. We can escape it, but ordinary people are not qualified to understand. So Prabhupada wanted to create a situation whereby people could come and live in an atmosphere freed from the influence of the mode of passion and the mode of ignorance. That was towards Prabhupada's final days with us. That was one of his concerns that he mentioned, that we've only done 50% of our work because the Varnashram system is still not practiced. So he wanted that we start developing, at least on our farms, a situation of goodness where the living entities could come and take shelter and learn about their real relationship with the Supreme Lord. So that was 1976, 77, Prabhupada started pushing this idea a lot about the about the Varnashram system. He wanted it to be introduced. He said unless it's introduced, then the whole human civilization is finished in Kali Yuga. We have to alter the circumstances that we live. We have to alter the consciousness and our perception of what we are and what this material world is and how it's running on its beacon. Anyway, people don't know Krishna as because the most, even the religious leaders, so-called, there's that film I think of Prabhupada with Cardinal Danilou from France, who's a cardinal. They're the top guys in the Catholic Church. If the Pope dies, the cardinals all get together and they pick another successor themselves. So the Prabhupada met with one of these gentlemen, I forget where it was from, the cardinal, and they were discussing, and Prabhupada asked him, what is your concept of God? So he said, well, I think about God as being a kind of divine flame. That was it. That was his. This is the cardinal of the top people. It's like one of our GBCs standing up, saying, "I think of Krishna as a kind of a divine flame." So that's the situation. Even the so-called religionists, they have actually no understanding whatsoever of who God is and what He does, what their relationship is with Him. So. The practices of Krishna consciousness that we do, of course, are based on the literatures of the six Goswamis, and the attempt by all the acharyas in our line is to give information about the real nature of God, its personality, as well as giving us a chance to give. I'm sorry, my brain's not working this morning. Anyway, to give us a chance to get out of the material world. Our whole program is that by the chanting, by the yajna, and then one can get free from the three modes of material nature and become qualified to come into this, as Prabhupada says, the program of Krishna. He has his idea, he has his situation, and Prabhupada says here that because Krishna wants to give transcendental bliss to the living entities, he appears in various forms. So, Satchidananda, that's the nature of the Supreme. It's also the nature of the ordinary living beings, because we're part and parcel. So, Chit, Satchidananda, Sat means eternal, Chit means all-knowing, or knowing sensibly. And Ananda means that when you actually realize your real spiritual nature as eternal part and parcel of Krishna, and the heart is cleansed, Krishna's in the heart, and he gives knowledge and understanding so that people can approach him and enter into his pastimes. When we get to that point, then the Ananda comes into it. By understanding our relationship with Krishna, we become very joyful, very blissful. And there's no question of attaining that point of real Ananda without following the guidance of the devotees. So, Gargamuni here, it says, Prabhupada says he was an astrologer, so he knew what others did not know. So that's one good endorsement for the qualified astrologers. It's a science which enables us to see the future and to know things that no ordinary person can know. So Gargamuni, of course, he was the priest of the family of Vasudeva, and also Nanda Maharaj. And still, even though he knew everything, he was highly qualified, at the same time Krishna employed this tactic during his birth, of course, being swapped with Lord Balaram. So he wanted that to be kept secret for the time being. And therefore, when it came to the name-giving ceremony of Krishna and Balaram, then they did that in a secret place, because to do it in the open would have caused Kamsa's men to come, the demons would come and create a disturbance in Goloka Vrindavan. So Gargamuni advised that you don't tell anybody about this event. You don't do in public the celebration of Krishna's appearance. You keep this all quiet for the time being. At the right time, the Supreme Lord will reveal himself. So, Krishna has so many names, and even Gargamuni did not know them all. It's to be concluded that Krishna, according to his transcendental activities, has many names and many forms. So, there are other places where Prabhupada says that there are incarnations of Krishna in every species. 8,400,000. So Krishna appears in unlimited ways, and if we qualify ourselves, then we can perceive that presence of Krishna in everything. Upendra once told me, Upendra, of course, was one of the early devotees. He joined in 1967. He was Prabhupada's personal servant in the last 8 months of Prabhupada's stay with us, and on and off through the years he'd been Prabhupada's personal servant. So one time they were walking, I think in Golden Gate Park, And Pendra was trying to understand what it means to be able to see Krishna everywhere. So he asked Prabhupada, does it mean that wherever a pure devotee looks, he sees little tiny forms of Krishna everywhere? What does it mean to understand that Krishna is everywhere? So then Prabhupada told him, he said, just like I have my shoes. So if you come past and you look and you see, oh, these shoes belong to Prabhupada. So he said, in the same way, a pure devotee, whatever he sees, it's not that he sees, millions and billions of tiny little Krishnas. Krishna is present within every atom and in between every atom. But what it means is that everything that's manifest is perceivable as being part and parcel of Krishna. So that way Prabhupada explained that seeing Krishna everywhere, yes, he's everywhere, but not necessarily in the forms that we think. I had a niece in England, and one time I went to visit my brother, the girl's father, and I had previously given one of these posters that we used to have, spiritual sky posters, and this particular one I'd given to my niece, and she stuck it up on the wall, and it was a picture of Lord Vishnu, just the same kind of post. It was the front cover, on the front cover of the Isha. So I gave her this poster, and a few years, well, I gave the poster actually to my mom, and she didn't do anything with it, so she gave it to this niece of ours. And I went to visit the family, and they actually had this poster of Lord Vishnu up on the wall. So the girls asked me, we've got this poster, but who is this? We don't know anything about it. So I said, oh, that's Lord Vishnu. And I explained a little bit. And then one of them said, but he can't be God. I said, why not? He's got 4 arms. How can God have four arms? So I asked her, I said, how many legs does a spider have? And how many arms does an octopus have? So, 6, 8. So I said, if a creature as lowly as a spider or an octopus can have more than 2 arms, then why can't God? Oh, okay. So they accepted that. That's the problem, is that people don't have any real information. They don't know actually anything about the real form of God. So that's one of the reasons for Krishna's appearance, to enhance his relationship with the devotees and to remove any obstacles, any personalities that are against him, that you have to, at some point, have a clear out, as we say. So, anyway, Krishna has many forms, he's got many names, unlimited. Even Gargamuni doesn't know how many names Krishna has. We chant as the Vishnu Sahasranam, that's 1,000, but that's just a sampling. And there are many different forms of Krishna, depending on the relationship that he has with the devotees that he interacts with. So, just like Lord Nrsimhadev, that's Prabhupada says that the form of Lord Nrsimhadev is not actually in the spiritual world, not in that half-man, half-lion. He's in the spiritual world, he has his own planet, but he's in his original form. The form of Lord Nrsimhadev was a half-man, half-lion. That was exhibited by Krishna because of his devotee, because Prahlad Maharaj was taking shelter of him. So therefore, Krishna took a particular form. So in the same way, with Kamsa, all the demonic personalities, they see Krishna in a particular way. That's one interesting thing, is that these demons actually do see Krishna, but they don't recognize him for what he is. I once asked Prabhupada, not about Lord Trinidad, but about Lord Balaram and his relationship with Duryodhana. Because Duryodhana, of course, was offense personified according to Vidura. And he was always creating problems for the Pandavas. And just before the battle of Kurukshetra, as a last gasp, then Krishna personally went to see the Kurus. And in their assembly, Duryodhana was there. And Krishna at one point actually exhibited a form, a universal form. Not the same universal form that Krishna manifests on the battle of Kurukshetra. This was a kind of a smaller version of it. And everybody in the assembly, Bhishma, etc., they all, recognize this is Krishna, the Supreme Lord, as the Supreme Lord. But Duryodhana, even though he was shown this ferocious form, Virat Rupa, he still insisted, no, this is not going to stop me. I want the Pandavas, I want them dead. So that demonstration, another form, Krishna can do that at any time, but he does so for his devotees. After he'd been to see the Kurus, then he went back to the Pandavas. He told them what had happened, and that was it. Then the war was declared, and they gathered up all their troops and met in Kurukshetra to fight to the end. So Krishna, of course, he didn't fight. That was one of the conditions. When they met, when Duryodhana and Arjuna, they met with Krishna, and Krishna declared that he would not fight. He would drive the chariot, but he wouldn't fight. Balaram said that he wouldn't even come to the battlefield until it was all over. He went off on pilgrimage somewhere else. So during the battle of Kurukshetra then, it ended with Duryodhana, I think on the 18th day. He was thoroughly defeated. There was only 3 men left. Himself, what's his name?
Ashwatthama.
Yeah, Ashwatthama and Kripacharya. That's it. So they 3 were left, and Duryodhana, because he went down into the lake, he was exhausted from fighting for 18 days. So there was one lake there. He went into the lake just to soothe his muscles and his brain. And the Pandavas were looking for him because the war would not be completed until Duryodhana was finished, killed. And besides that, Bhima, he had taken a vow that he would break the legs of Duryodhana and his friends for the shaming of Draupadi. So they had their spies, they went out, trackers, and they saw this lake, and it was very unusual. It was completely still, it was unnatural, and so they looked in the lake and they saw Duryodhana at the bottom of the lake, just trying to recuperate. So then they were on the top, they shouted at him, this is not the behavior of a warrior, you coward, why are you hiding? All your men have been killed for you, and you're running away and going into the water. So that made him, because that had a purpose, it stung his ego. And so he came straight out of the water. And he said, I'm not afraid, I'll fight any of you. So at that point then, he had to choose. Yudhisthira went forward and he said, look, you can pick who your opponent is. If you defeat it, then we'll give you the whole kingdom. What you wanted for your whole life. Now you fight one of us, and if you win, we'll give you everything, we'll become your slaves. Krishna was not very happy that Duryodhana Yudhisthira made that offer. After 18 days of fighting and slaughtering over 600 million troops, now you want to give it, you want to bank everything on this one challenge. But anyway, because he said it, then you have to go through with it. So they were fighting, Duryodhana and Bhima. Bhima was considered equal. He was stronger than Duryodhana, but he was not as expert in wielding a club as Duryodhana. So anyway, he lost that fight by a little bit of trickery from Krishna. Well, not exactly trickery, but a hint from Krishna. He took a blade of grass and broke it. And then Bhima understood, all right, now this is the time to fulfill my vow. So as they were fighting, and he smashed the thighs. Although in club fighting, you're supposed to, only it's like boxing nowadays, you can't hit them below the belt. It's considered, to be against the rules. But Bhima, he had this promise to fulfill that he would break the legs of Duryodhana. So he did. He smashed them after Krishna said he smashed them, and they left him on the ground and they went. So Prabhupada was talking about this. We were in Vrindavan, and afterwards in his room, I was trying to figure out what Duryodhana, what his relationship was with Krishna and Balaram. And because Balaram had taught him how to fight with the club. And because of that direct tuition from Balaram, then Duryodhana became the best of all the club fighters. So I was trying to figure out, and also Prabhupada said that Duryodhana Balaram was somewhat in favour of Duryodhana, and therefore he left the battle before it even started, because he didn't want to see Duryodhana smashed to pieces. He knew it was going to happen, but he didn't want to be there when it happened, because he had some affection for him, because he was his best pupil. So it seems at odds that the person that was offence personified would be favoured by Lord Balaram, and taught the art of using the club in such a way that nobody, even Bhima, could challenge him, practically speaking. So in that, I was thinking about, why does Balaram favour Duryodhana? It seems very odd. So I asked Prabhupada, is that because Duryodhana is actually a devotee for this pastime? The Kurukshetra war and this whole conflict between the Kurus and the Pandavas. Is that one of Krishna's pastimes? That as Krishna, he's supporting the Pandavas, and the same personality, Balaram. There's no difference between Krishna and Balaram, except for one's white, one's black. So I was kind of confused at what the relationships were. So I asked Prabhupada, does Duryodhana and this relationship that he has with Balaram, is that just part of the Leela? And Duryodhana is actually a devotee taking the part of a demon. And Prabhupada said yes, that's the idea. So you can't fight with God unless you are God. Sometimes, because Gargamuni was giving so many names, and Balaram, of course, he was also there. So he also got many names. So anyway, Krishna and Balaram, this is right at the very beginning of their appearance. They were, what's the word? Yeah, it's like I'm sorry. I have to leave that. I'm sorry, my brain doesn't work sometimes as well as it used to. But anyway, Balaram, in some senses, is like Krishna's alter ego. Do you know that phrase, alter ego? You have your own ego, and then you have another manifestation of it, alter ego, alternate. So Krishna and Balaram, then together the Supreme Personality of Godhead. But Balaram was favouring one side, Krishna was favouring the other side. But they arranged it so that neither of them would be involved in the actual fighting, only their followers. Krishna was just driving the chariot, Balaram was off somewhere else. So they didn't favour one side or the other, at least in terms of the actual fight that was going on. So in that way, it's like sometimes when Krishna wants to do something, he gets Balaram to do it instead, so that they swap positions, but they don't take sides. They arrange things in such a way. They arrange things in such a way that their friendships and their associates are always favoured, but at the same time they don't interfere with the other leelas that are going on. So Duryodhana, he was a demon, acting as a demon, but to be able to directly interact with Krishna, you have to be completely pure. So in that way then, there's these kinds of various situations and names that refer to them, and also their activities. These are leelas. They're to help Krishna to establish his program, as Prabhupada says. When the Lord comes to the material world, he comes with a purpose and a mission. And the demons, they try to deprogram the devotees. Krishna and Balaram, of course, keep themselves aloof from certain situations, just so the devotees can fight it out amongst themselves. So, okay, I'm going to finish at this point. Does anybody have any comments or questions?
Even the Hare Krishna trees where Prabhupada visited and chanted the Hare Krishna mantra, that place also some obstacles was there.
What's that?
Srila Prabhupada went to Hare Krishna tree and started chanting Hare Krishna mantra.
Oh, the tree?
Hare Krishna tree.
Right, Tompkins like that.
Yeah.
So what
There was in the beginning some obstacles and difficulties, Prabhupada.
No, there's always obstacles. You'll never get a change, you'll never get a situation in the material world where there isn't some kind of obstacle. Prabhupada had to face so many problems, personally, and he had to face so many problems when he started, the ISKCON movement. As soon as things got a little organized, people started to get worried, and this deprogramming business began. They thought that there was a report actually from Bhagavatam Prabhu. He was in southeast USA, that was his zone, So he reported to Prabhupada that one lawmaker, he'd been on the TV actually being interviewed about, the devotees and the nuisance that they thought we were. And this lawmaker, he said, this Hare Krishna movement is spreading like an epidemic. He said, if we don't do something to stop them, then within 10 years they'll capture the whole government. So this was one of the councillors in Houston City. And Prabhupada heard that, he said, oh, very good. Hare Krishna movement, it's an epidemic. And he used that several times. We got that in November 1976. And then every meeting that Prabhupada had with outsiders or with newspaper men, etc., Prabhupada would quote that. And Hare Krishna movement epidemic. So, any other questions? Yes.
Just now you mentioned that Narasimha Dev's form, it's not the same form in the spiritual world. Could you elaborate on that? And does it also apply to other forms such as Kurma, Deprogramme, and all the others?
Krishna manifests various forms according to the desire of the devotees. So it's not just, of course there's all the Vaikuntha planets which are unlimited and they're all occupied by the Supreme Lord and his devotees. But generally that's a situation, the level of worship that's practiced there is Shantadas and the two early Shantadas and yeah, Dasya, thank you. So they're the predominant features of their relationship. But in Goloka Vrindavan, then of course you've got friendships, you've got parental affection, and ultimately you've got conjugal affection. So, what was the question?
No, I asked, you mentioned just now that the form of Narasimha Dev is different in the spiritual world.
Yeah, yes. So what's your question?
What's the form of the spiritual world?
As far as I understand, I don't know any references for this, but I was told that the form, when the Lord is not manifesting, is lion, half male form. That's only for the material world activities. But in the spiritual world, he appears in his four-arm form, Vishnu. Is there any of our scholars here who can add anything to that?
According to Srimad commentary, she manifests the man of life form in Vaikuntha.
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear that.
Sanatana Goswami writes in his commentary in Srimad Bhagavatam that Lord Narasimha has a half man, half lion form in Vaikuntha. And Kurma also, Matsya also, there's just forms, that's what I read. Like in the Shastra, it's actually really, the Lord has his forms, like all the planets.
Okay, I have to see the reference to that. Yeah. What I understood right from the very beginning of joining ISKCON was that we were told that Lord Narasimha and Prahlad Maharaj, they have this interaction of the form in the material world, but in the spiritual world, Lord Narasimha appears in his Vishnu form. So maybe you could do a bit of investigation, so try and find out what reference that's from. So that's what I understood. might be wrong. Very difficult to know Krishna.
I was always taught like this, but then I read this. That's what it's written. So I'm just wrong.
Yeah, well, maybe he's both. I mean, he's the same person, he can change his form at will. Anyway, why don't you look it up and see if you can find the reference. Alright, I'm going to finish. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.